Okay, so what we're going to look at is different forms of output. So you have to know possible forms of output, understand the features of different forms of output, and analyze potential output in relation to target audience. I'm going to talk through this Prezi. Obviously, you can go and look at this Prezi yourself if you want to. There are videos in this Prezi that I might quickly skip to, but I probably won't watch the whole video with you because it will take too long. If you wish to watch more of the video, which I advise you do, because it will help you think and learn, then you'll need to go to the Prezi yourself rather than use this video of the Prezi. Okay, so we need to identify possible forms of output, describe possible forms of output, state the advantages of output in relation to the target audience, state disadvantages of output in relation to target audience, and select suitable forms of output for a situation in relation again to the target audience. So let's have a little look. Firstly, if we're doing this as an activity, you can think about this now. Try and think of many different forms of output as you can that might occur in a system. Think of many different forms of output. Now, I don't mean output device like monitor. I mean, what would the monitor show, such as text, for example. There's other forms of output that we've talked about before. Sound is another one. Think about different systems, not just your computer system, but things like a shopping cash register system, or even your computer game systems at home have different forms of output. Think of all the different forms of output that you could have. If you want to pause and do that, that's great, and then have a little discussion. Then we can look at the different forms now. So here are lots of different forms. These are ones that you will likely be presented with or need to think about in the exam. But we have, this isn't an exhaustive list though, there's obviously more, but we have sound, we have video, we have images, we have reports, we have animation, we have interactive presentations, and we have graphs. So let's look at graphs first. Graphs show trends very clearly. Different types of graph can illustrate different characteristics, and when two variables need to be compared, a visual representation can be very useful. However, the importance of the scales is paramount because otherwise a very misleading picture can be given. Also, the specific values are not easily read from a graph. Indeed, in a continuous distribution, it is simply not possible to take reliable readings to any degree of accuracy. They are good for an overview, but another method might be needed if precise figures are required. So here's a graph. It's good for an overview, but we cannot tell the exact figure here. It looks like it might be 100, but it could be 99.8 or something like that. So we cannot tell the exact figure in this graph, but it is very good for a representation to see school attendance and how that impacts on school grade. Reports. A report is a hard copy printout of the values of variables. This has the advantage of producing the actual figures according to values specified by the user. However, the figures themselves may need skill to interpret their significance, and the value of figures is often hard to justify. Meaning, we can see the accurate figures now, but it's quite difficult to see what's happening excuse me, compared to the graph. So, as it said before, the graph on its own, sometimes you need something to go with it, with a figure such as a report, and equally it's nice to have a report but also a graph to go with it so you can get a quick visual representation. But a report is good because it shows the exact figures as it mentions up here. The actual figures according to values specified by the user. And because it shows the values of variables, every time we run this report, these will be updated automatically. So every time you run this report, it will be updated. Example of a report might be the high score in a game. That's a report in itself, showing you who's the top of the leaderboard. League tables are reports. Anything in the table is a report. Interactive presentations. Now this one is a little bit more difficult. You will have seen this, but you just have to apply it to where you've seen it. Previous forms have relied on the format of the report being decided without the luxury of being able to see what the figures look like in the first place. The system could allow the user to decide the type and range of output required during the run. Then there is some positive user involvement leading to an interactive presentation. The user can adjust the output to suit the example. So if we have a look at this, we have a situation where we can change what is put in and therefore what comes out in this type of report. So we're not just getting a standard report that shows all the information. We can actually change the report to present what we want to see. It might be that we only want to see January results and therefore we tick a box that says January. It might be that we don't want to see the salary and wages as a full. We want to break it down into individuals. If I click on this plus, it would break it down into individuals. So this gives us a more detailed way of interacting with the presentation of information. Sound. Many applications do not lend themselves to a standard visual printout. Sound can be used for output from some systems. Obvious examples would be voice synthesis for reporting to blind people. An alarm system to protect property against burglars is another example. So sound is sometimes used to highlight something. The classic one that you lot will know is when you go to the supermarket checkout, the automatic checkout that you do yourself. Every time you scan in a barcode, it makes a beeping noise. That's to alert you that you have actually scanned it properly. So sound is good for situations where a visual or standard piece of information or printout is not suitable. Obviously, sound might not be as good in noisy environments, so you have to be aware of that and think about your environment when you're deciding what sort of output is suitable. Video. Video is a visually satisfying form of output that takes large amounts of memory to produce because the nature of the medium requires large quantities of pictures to produce the feel of continuous motion. Video is useful for demonstration of techniques where there is little value in pages of instruction. A simple video can illustrate something better. Okay, so essentially we're talking about using a video rather than having to instruct someone to do something, rather than having lots of text. You see videos all the time. You see them on user guides on various websites nowadays and help screens. Some of you might be using them to learn how to do C++ and things like that. So videos are a good form of output for certain situations. Negative, obviously, as it says here, is they take a large amount of memory to produce. Images. Again, images or pictures can be used to enhance understanding. These may be created using graphics packages. They may be scanned into the computer or imported from a camera. By using a number of slightly different images, animation can be created. So we can use images and animation as well. So number of images we can set up an animation. And the last one we have therefore is animation, which provides a good stimulus for an audience and leads from one slide to another when making a slide-based presentation. Takes considerably less processing power than other forms of motion, unless the image being animated is complex. Animation is used so often that it can come across as being a boring technique that has been added for gloss. Care needs to be taken when using animation as it can detract from the presentation if it involves complex changes. A simple animation can be created by using two images, storing two pictures of a Christmas tree, one plain green and the other small circles, and switching quickly between them can create the illusion of flashing lights. Now, animation can be used in various ways. So if we had a website again with lots of animation on to highlight different places, that might be good, but too much animation can be distracting and frustrating. Same if you had back to the supermarket shopping system or automatic checkout system. If we had too much animation in that, it would get very frustrating and flashing all the flashing lights. But occasionally you want a bit of animation, such as the little animation to show you where to put your items when you scan them, showing you to put them in the bag and things like that, just to give you a bit of information rather than having to read all the time. Okay, so output according to target audience. Let's have a look at this situation. You have an intensive care ward at a hospital. There are 6 beds, each with a patient who is being monitored by a computer. The outputs are available for a variety of users. There is a nurse at the desk at one end of the ward. The nurse has other duties but is expected to make the rounds of the patients to check on their progress at regular intervals. Doctors come around the ward twice a day to check on the patients and make any adjustments to their medication. So a nurse might be sitting at the end of the ward here. There's lots of patients in the room. Doctors will come around twice a day to check the patients. What output If a patient is sensed by the computer system to have suffered a relapse while the nurse is sitting at the desk, what would be a suitable form of output? What would they want to see? Have a think, pause and have a quick think. Maybe note down, have a look back at what we looked at before, all the different forms of output. What would be suitable? Okay, so hopefully you've had a little think and written down a few ideas. Let's have a look now. If we look at this, we have a nurse sitting here, and down this end, somewhere down here, there might be 10 or 15 patients. So what would a suitable output be? A sensible output would be sound. Some sort of alarms bring the notice of the nurse to the fact that something is wrong. This might be accomplished by a flashing light or some other device to quickly draw attention to the particular one of the 6 patients. Sorry, it said 6 before, needing attention. So, sound on its own isn't enough because you cannot always determine where the sound is coming from, but a sound to alert you that there's a problem, and then a flashing light to show you where the problem is. A flashing light on its own might not be enough because you might be looking in the wrong direction. Text or report wouldn't be suitable in this case because it is too much information to take in and you won't be able to see it from a distance. So, some sort of alert and sound. Okay, next situation. The nurse has to make a visual check of the patient's conditions on a regular basis. When she walks around, what would be a suitable form of output to get an overview whether the patient is improving, deteriorating or remaining in a stable condition? So again, 6 patients, she's walking around from one to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. She wants an overview of each one. Let's have a think, pause. Have a think now. Hopefully you've now had a little think and you've paused it. If you haven't, pause it now before I move on. And when I move on, we'll have a look. And what we've got is when when the nurse goes around the patients to make a visual check of the conditions, it is not necessary to know exact figures of heart rate or blood sugar or anything else like that. Exact figures aren't needed, but a quick glance at a screen showing a scrolling graph of the state of the patient's vital signs over the last 20 minutes would be perfectly adequate. If the graph looks in any way abnormal, it may be necessary to get a printout of the actual values of the variables for the patient to determine what action, if any, needs to be taken. So a simple graph would be suitable, and we could have a graph on a machine that might be next to the bed. This graph just shows correlation of everything to see against a standard line how the patient's doing. If the patient's results are too high, there could be a problem. If they're too low, there could be a problem. And that's easily highlighted over the last 20 minutes. So, something like this. Alright, which we've all seen before, showing the heart rate and how the heart is still beating. But you might have something similar with regards to blood sugar or blood pressure and various other things. Right. Doctor makes a daily ward round. He will generally get 5 to 10 minutes with each patient to see how they're getting on. What do you think the doctor will see? Well, you can see a bit of clue in here, what they might be looking at. Pause now, have a think. And now we'll move on. The doctor may well want to see a printout of all the variable values for the last 24 hours, particularly if there's something happening to the patient which is difficult to understand. Historical data can hold a clue to present symptoms. So as we have seen here, he's looking at a report with all the variable data in the last 24 hours. So a printed report, a hard copy report showing all the information about that patient. Okay, so what might the nurse do in this situation? The doctor may change the medication or parameters within which the patient can be considered stable. What might the nurse do within the system? So if the doctor suddenly decides that they want to change the parameters of what is considered a stable heart rate. So they want to say, instead of the heart rate being between the values of 50 and 80, they're going to change it to between 50 and 70. What has the nurse got to do? So a quick look at this video. We'll just watch the start of it. You can watch this on your own later. We'll pause this in a moment. Okay, there's a few things to point out on this. Alright, let's pause that for now. Alright, let's just have a quick look at this first before we go into thinking about what the nurse might do in this situation. I don't know if you just heard that, but there's a little button here called silence alarms, and as you can see there's a flag here, bit of information, bit of text at the top of the screen, so it's laid out in a position that hopefully people can see it, and also an icon here so that people can see that the alarm has been silenced. If you watch this video a bit further, what happens is a lot of people have died due to the fact the alarms have been silenced. I'm assuming because when you're pushing this machine along, you probably press that button with your thumb by mistake. And if we look at it, it's not really clear that the alarm has been silenced. If you were standing 20 meters away, could you see it? If you were standing 5 meters away, could you see it? At the end of the ward, would you be able to see that? So the way this information is displayed on here, although useful in some respects, has got some faults. One way that we could fix this, my idea I think, would be to change the background color from black to a red maybe, to show that this alarm has been silenced, and then you wouldn't even need that there as such. That would just mean the alarm is silenced. It wouldn't just be relying on that text and that little icon in the corner. If we want to look at the layout of this information, we've got the numbers laid out on the left, all the graphs laid out on the right hand side to make it easy to scan through the graphs. It's consistent. We've got the menu system in the top left hand corner. You might put important information in a certain place, so this might go in order of how important this information is. Excuse me. Also, we have not just text, we have graphs, and these are rolling graphs as we've described before, which means that we can quickly get a glance of the information without having to actually figure it out through numbers. These numbers are very big and bold, and we can see them clearly. There's different colors, so you can see which colors are related to which piece of information. They're spaced out well. All these different things you need to consider when you're talking about how information should be displayed or how information should be output. Right, so back to the situation with the nurse. What's she got to do? Well, let's say that we wanted to look at a heart rate that was between 50 and 70, or did I say 60 and 70, something like that, whichever. The alarms will need to rectify this. So the nurse is going to have to make changes on this system so the parameters or variables have changed. If it was a constant, then if the doctor decides that they want to check a different range, then the alarms wouldn't work at that range. So the nurse needs to change the settings of the parameters so the alarms will work. Also, any output that might come on here, it needs to flag up if the output was going to change color, or if the output had a little flag to say there was an error rather than just a sound alarm, then that needs to be altered as well. Or the parameters need to be altered for that as well. So you'd assume that you alter the parameters once and it would make relevant changes to the output on screen as well as the alarm output to say when that would go off. Right, let's go on. So let's have a look. What did we say? Nurse alters graphs, scales and data parameters. That's something I forgot to mention. So this will involve the nurse resetting values on the scales of the graphical output. So if we go back and just have a quick look at the graphical output, the reason we want to reset these values is if it changed a lot, these graphs might appear too small or too big. Whereas if we change the parameters, then we can see the graph clearer for the setting that it's been assigned. So the scales of graphical output will need to be reset, and the resetting the parameters for setting off the audible alarm will need to happen as well. This, as we know, is an interactive presentation because the nurse is changing settings, and that will change how the information appears on the video. So, on the outputs of the machine, which is obviously an interactive presentation. Right. What output for this? Once a week the nurse takes a first aid class at the local sixth form college. There are too many students for a one-to-one presentation all the time. What could be utilised instead? Well, think about it. You lot use this sort of thing all the time. Does anyone have any ideas? If we have a quick look at this video, I'm not going to play the whole thing. You don't really need to watch the whole of this, just to give you an idea. So what we've got is a video package, and also in that DVD instructional video package we have various things like tools, quizzes and checklists. So college computer system has been loaded with demonstration software showing animation of the technique for artificial respiration. So it could have animations or it could have actual videos, as we've discussed before. Pictures possibly, but animation or videos are better because it actually shows things taking place. Where do you use this? All the time on our VLE, our virtual learning environment. This in itself, what I'm doing now, is a presentation recorded as a video. So you will be able to watch this and go through this presentation to learn about the information without me having to be there. It's quite amazing, isn't it? So you should be able to answer these sorts of questions very easily. Demonstration software or videos, interactive videos, anything like that, that you can have to help demonstrate, or animations demonstrate a point without lots of need for several people demonstrating to individuals. Right. When we consider output, we must consider the importance of timeliness and relevance. So, timeliness. Data tends to have a limited lifespan, which can be different for the same data in different situations. The data on heart rate from 3 hours ago is not going to be of importance to the nurse looking after the patient, but it may be of great value to the doctor in providing a clue as to the reason for a sudden change in condition. I think I'm getting a cold. I need a nurse. Right, so it's great value to the doctor for 3 hours because they want to see how the patient has deteriorated or improved over a longer period, whereas the nurse is just going to be looking after the patient and checking to see if they're okay at that point. So the timeliness of the information is important depending on the user. The relevance. Some data is not relevant to a particular situation, however up to date it is. So if we had a record on that monitor to say the patient has blue eyes, that has no bearing on their physical state, i.e. whether they're well or not, and so should not be considered relevant for this example. However, it might be relevant in other circumstances. So you might find that people with blue eyes are more likely to buy blue cars, for example. That might be relevant in that situation, but in this situation it is not relevant. Right, other scenarios. We can look at 3 other scenarios. I want you to have a look at these because these sorts of things will come up in the exam. These 2 definitely, ATM and supermarket self-service. There's some videos to go with them, so go and watch those as well. And try and see what type of information will be shown and note them down somewhere in your notes. It says whiteboard here. If you're doing this as a class activity, that's great, but otherwise note it down either on your websites or in your folders or wherever you keep your notes. So we've got an ATM, a supermarket self-service. That's the first video showing you how to use supermarket self-service. We've all used this before. Look at all the types of information that is output from this and the forms of output. We've got an ATM, how to use an ATM machine, a little presentation from this young lady. Very often questions will come up on this, so I suggest you look at that video. And fantasy football website, just for something different. What are the different types of information on here? There should be some obvious ones that you can see that you will know from playing games like FIFA Ultimate Team. I won't watch that video with you. You can watch that in your own time. Right, let's look at this exam question. Have a go at this. Pause this after I've gone through the description for you. A reaction vessel in a chemical plant is monitored along with many others by a computer system using a number of sensors of different types. Describe 3 different types of output that would be used by such a system, stating why such a use would be necessary. So different types of output, and there's 3 types. So you get 1 for type of output and 1 for stating. So they're key. Types is key. It doesn't mean monitor. It doesn't mean speaker. It means what we've just gone through essentially. So the 6 lots of different things we've gone, and making sure you say why such use would be necessary. So 1 for the type of output and 1 for the use of the output. So pause that now, have a go at that question. Try to relate the use to the scenario as well. Okay, so here's the answer. Graphs, and we've got of temperature or pressure, shows the general state of the reaction vessel. Okay, to show the operator the trends in the vessel, for example, shows clearly where the temperature is increasing. Okay, so easily graphs to show where the temperature is increasing would get you 2 marks. Reports of temperature. While the graph shows a trend, the report gives precise figures. So report to give precise figures of the temperature at different times. Sound, an alarm would sound if the temperature went past a safety limit. hard copy printout to allow investigators to study problems that may cause a shutdown or unacceptably poor product. Okay, that's an important one that you might want to remember. This might come up in a different sort of way, this question, so that might be a key thing that you make a note of right now. Notice the bottom. Knowledge of chemical reaction is not part of the computer syllabus. We know this, but it's expected that you will realise that heat or something else plays an important part in the reaction. So if we look back at it again, a chemical plant is monitored along with others by a computer system using a number of sensors of different types, 3 types of output. So in a chemical plant, the heat is important. So we need to think of that. Any other sort of plant industrial situation, heat is probably going to be an important one. In certain situations it might be sound that would be monitored. In certain situations it might be light that would be monitored. So those are the 3 things that we could be monitoring, and they are the ways that we can have that output monitored. Okay. Right, as an extension, if you want to, be good for your revision, create a presentation that outlines the output that may occur in a Formula 1 pit lane. Refer to the examples given in the previous slides to help you. You don't need this presentation, you could just note it down. What do you think will be the forms of output that could occur in a Formula 1 pit lane? Discuss it with a partner, discuss it with different people, and note them down and put them in your notes. Can you come up with your own scenarios? Can you think of suitable forms of output and information? Ask someone else, do they come up with the same ones? All these different things you can think about. Okay. This would be a good way to revise, to get into 2s and 3s and just discuss them. Come up with an idea and then decide what you think and discuss it as a group. And that is all you need to know for the possible forms of output. Understand the different features of forms of output, and analyse potential output in relation to target audience, so depending on what the situation is. Okay, a relatively simple topic actually that has quite a bit to think about, but once you get used to answering those sorts of questions, the exam question that was there, you should find that as a very, very simple topic to do. Anyway, I hope it went well. Any questions, obviously, you can come and see me or speak to each other. I would suggest that's your first protocol because you're more likely to get each other before you get to me. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.